Okay, so welcome everybody. So thrilled to have you guys here. My name is Astrid. I'm a reporter with Germany's business daily Handelsblatt. I'm based in New York. I cover finance and crypto, and that's become even more like a symbiotic thing here. So I'm very, very pleased to have here with me Kain Warwick, founder of Synthetix, to talk about why gender diversity matters for DeFi and Web3. So thank you very much for bringing this topic here to us, super important. And ideally, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit, and then I have a couple questions, and then I would love to open it up to the audience so we can have like a frank and honest discussion about where we are, where we can go, and why it's so hard to go there. And I say this having witnessed gender diversity and lack thereof on Wall Street and in tech, and so it's not surprising that we are where we are, but even more important that we talk about it. And with that, Kain, tell us a little bit just about how you got to where you are right now and what Synthetix does, so we are on the same page.
Sure, awesome. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Synthetix is one of the older DeFi protocols. Started as a project called Haven. It was a stablecoin that was trying to disrupt Tether, like DAI, and like some of the other stablecoins out there. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the first iteration, and so then we pivoted and became Synthetix. Synthetix is more of a generalized synthetic asset platform, so it allows you to get various different synths that represent different forex currencies, things like gold, silver, Bitcoin, all on the Ethereum blockchain. And now on Optimism, which is an L2 scaling solution. So yeah, that's me. That's Synthetix.
And how many women do you guys have in your organization right now?
Technically, I would say 3 we have.
Okay, out of 40, 30?
Out of about 30,
30.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Maybe 30, 35, yeah.
All right. Okay, and then, so why is it so hard to get more gender diversity? Maybe like specifically for Synthetix, and then we'll talk more about the industry. Yeah,
I think it's hard, especially for us because we are a heavily engineering focused organization. So of those, 30 or so people, probably 85% of them are engineers, either front end or Solidity engineers, or even the people who are like non-engineers like myself, like we're doing mechanism design, things like that. And I just think that we don't have the best onboarding processes to bring people from outside of crypto, women and less represented groups into crypto. Mm-hmm. We don't have great onboarding for anyone, but I think for male senior engineers, there's probably processes of how you can kind of bring them in and kind of make them a bit more accessible to crypto projects, mm-hmm. But I don't think that we have those onboarding funnels for other people.
Okay, and are you working to change that for Synthetix specifically, or
for Synthetix? So one of the challenges that I think that we have, right, mm-hmm. And it's my previous company was a payment company. We worked with a lot of the crypto exchanges in Australia. We started back in about 2014, and I put a lot of focus on having a very diverse workforce. So I think at one point we had maybe 15 employees and spoke like 10 different languages. 60% of the people were female. Mm-hmm. It was a very, very diverse workforce. Mm-hmm. And then when we launched Synthetix, we pulled some of those people across. Mm-hmm. They joined from Blue Shift and came to Synthetix. But we've just found it much harder to get a kind of diverse group of people in Synthetix. And so I think as Synthetix has become more decentralized, that's become even harder because I don't have control of hiring the same way that I did. With Blue Shift, I could be like, all right, let's make sure that we hire a diverse candidate. Mm-hmm. Now, the source of our contributors is really coming from the community. And if you were to go into our Discord, there's 80,000 people, I would shudder to, a lot of them are anon, so it's hard to know if they're male, female, right, non-binary, whatever, but it's like very highly male dominated within our community. And given that there isn't anyone who can sort of direct hiring or direct kind of diversity, it becomes community driven. If the community is very male dominated, it's hard to kind of unwind that, I think.
And then take a step back, you have had a diverse company. So why is it important? And I'd like to separate it. Why is it important to have diversity in DeFi? And then we'll talk about Web3 afterwards.
Yeah, DeFi for me is like a very specific class of like a solution that we're trying to build for human coordination, right? So, DeFi is obvious, it's finance and, smart contracts, it kind of makes sense. It's one of the reasons why it was the first category to really, get interesting to people and start to get traction and product market fit and drive things. But it's not the only thing, obviously, right? And so, I guess when you are trying to like rethink how we coordinate humans, if you only have one very narrow slice of humans that you're allowing to participate in that process, is not going to be an ideal outcome. So we do need more inclusivity and a wider range of points of view and more diversity to solve these problems.
And then talk about Web3. Now, if we go into virtual worlds, right, that may be built by men for men, like why do we need more diversity there?
I think one thing that is maybe makes me a little bit more confident for the future is that we have seen more diversity over the last year. As the range of different applications of Web3 have kind of grown, so NFTs and more cultural things, music and art and various other things, the diversity has changed massively. Like if you go into a crypto room today versus like 2 years ago, it's very, very different place. And so I do think that like DeFi specifically, finance specifically, can be very male dominated. But as we are, building different products and different solutions, it seems to be organically getting more diverse, which doesn't mean that we can't make it better, but it's definitely a better place than it was a few years ago.
That's interesting. Okay, so how do we make it better?
I think we, individually, we need to all try to be more open to different viewpoints. I think that's one thing that we can do. I think we need to sort of foster open communities. And this is something in Synthetix that I felt very strongly about. We tried to have a very open and sort of inclusive community, but the sample of people we were drawing from were just a bunch of finance guys, right? And so like it was hard to kind of find a way to like bring people into this community, even though we were open and we did have some very interesting people come in with very interesting perspectives. It was just hard to kind of bring them in. And so I do think that as the kind of surface area of what Web3 and crypto looks like has expanded, and again, NFTs have driven a lot of this, and the cultural aspects have driven a lot of this. We need to make sure that those people who might have come in because of NFTs or for some other reason are welcome in DeFi and in some of these other kind of niches within Web3.
And you bring up a good point. So if projects get more decentralized, like you mentioned earlier, how can we make sure, like, could there be like a mechanism in place that you say, we have 10 positions, 5 need to be filled with women? That could be in the DAO or in a...
So I was actually thinking about this today, right? So we have, I think, 7 different governance bodies within Synthetix.
Right.
The Spartan Council is the most important one. It's the one that makes decisions about what the protocol can and can't do.
The Spartan Council.
Yeah, the Spartan Council. Yeah,
very
I know. Interesting.
Yes.
I know, right? Yeah. So, I know. So there's your first problem, right? And shockingly, we've never had a female on the Spartan Council. We have never even had someone apply, which is pretty bad, right? And so I think now of those 7 governing bodies, we have one woman who is a representative of the core contributors. So we've got a core contributor committee. It's 2 men and 1 woman, which is the first time that we've had someone in a senior governance position, right? Now, the good thing about that is that it means that the core contributors, as we expand that group from 30 to 50 to 100 or whatever, we do have a female voice on that committee, which is good. But there are other places like the grants committee where it's just 3 dudes, and their perspective is going to be very different. And you're right, like we could potentially try to codify some kind of diversity metrics or something like that. One of the challenges I think with trying to do that is you absolutely will get pushback from some of the more extreme libertarian elements within crypto where they say, no, it should be, purely meritocratic and we should, allow only the person who is best qualified or whatever, which shouldn't necessarily stop us from trying to do that. But I think it would definitely create some governance challenges for sure.
Okay. I mean, you could argue it doesn't mean that just because it's a woman, right?
Not at all. No, my personal view is absolutely have some kind of some targets, right? We're trying to bring more people in. We've clearly done a terrible job up to date. We've got 100 people that have been on these various councils and there's one woman. Let's try and do something to fix it. I'm just saying there may be some more reactive elements within some of these communities that would object to that.
And I appreciate it because that's exactly what reality is like. And so help us understand, how do we deal with the libertarian culture that you find in many Discord channels, in many DAOs, in many projects that frankly would probably deter me too, because that's not what I want to deal with at work. Yeah. So how can we deal with that?
It's a challenging problem. And again, we are very early and DeFi is still very early. So DeFi specifically has, I think, a very narrow range of worldviews and perspectives, right? But it is definitely getting better. And I think it's getting better as these other Web3 use cases and adjacencies, kind of converge, right? In the same way that you sort of describe finance and crypto converging, as we have more people that understand how wallets work and get MetaMask and are in Discords already, we should naturally, I think, get, a little bit more diversity, but we also need to make sure that we make an effort to be inclusive and try and bring those people in. We do that, but I think we could be better.
And then, would you step into Slack or whatever, using channels to say, guys, this is not the right tone, or leave this out, or don't? I don't know. Is that something?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Synthetix Discord is probably the most laissez-faire place in crypto. Basically anything goes, right? Now, that creates interesting dynamics, right? Because if you're allowing anything and you're not, we've been very anti-censorship, right? That said, we have very strong moderation rules, and we've got about 20 moderators who are very quick to kind of kill anything that is racist or whatever, sexist, etc. So we do have some moderation rules, but in terms of, just general perspectives, we try to open it up to as many perspectives as possible.
But then would it be fair to assume that the loudest people still maybe drown out others?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And do we just accept that? Or?
I think, my view is I've lived inside that Discord for a very long time. I'm a fairly progressive person, I would say. And so, my approach to that is to engage it, right? We allow any discussion, but we also engage with it, right? And we've got a lot of people. There's one person in particular who's, sort of seems to have boundless energy for taking on these trolls and people that are, whatever. And we'll just sit there and argue with them and try and convince them, especially anything that's homophobic or whatever. He'll sit there and be like, no, you're wrong, and just go through and really fight it. And we allow these things to happen out in the open, these conversations to happen out in the open. So we do definitely try and fight back to make the community as welcoming as possible. But I guess there is a trade-off when you're allowing, and any kind of anything goes environment. So.
Okay. And have you set, goals that by next year we want to have 6 women and I'm mentoring 3, so next year we have 6, or how do you sort of hold yourself accountable, I guess?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So one of the projects that I've been working with for the last 18 months, very, very closely, probably the project that I'm most close to is Optimism. And so Jing from Optimism is, CEO, founder, and I speak to her all the time. So I do have one person that I've been working with. It's a very low bar, right? But, I put a lot of time and effort into that relationship and trying to build that up. But I also have a group of mentees there are 6 different projects that I'm mentoring at the moment that are trying to get onto Optimism. So trying to help them make the transition from L1 or get their heads around this idea of going L2 native, Optimism native. When I put out the call for people to apply to that, I think I got about 20 applications. There's 0 women founders, co-founders, or even team members on any of those projects. And I actually said to Bex today when we were talking about this, the next cohort that I do, I think my plan is to say, if you don't have, and I'll probably have 5 or 6 teams that I'll be mentoring, which will be in a couple months, to say, like, if you don't have a female co-founder or founder, like, you can't apply to this. Because again, I think you need to, if you're going to be serious about trying to be more inclusive, you need to really go out. And it's not that I think that there were no projects, but maybe for whatever reason, a female founder or co-founder didn't feel comfortable applying for that mentorship or whatever. Whereas if you say, this is what you have to have in order to be able to be mentored, then
it happens.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because Goldman Sachs and others said, if you want us to take you public, you have to have at least 1 or 2 female members on the board.
And you're going to get some reactionary, crazy people who say, like, that's a terrible thing to do or whatever, but, like, that's life, right?
Yeah.
I deal with trolls all day long, so it's not too concerning to me.
Is that frustrating? Just that so much time you have to deal with trolls of sorts, but just noise instead of focusing on actual...
I mean, at this point, like within Synthetix, so much of it is the community, right? So like making sure that the community works and making sure that the community is engaged and that information is propagating through the community correctly is my role, really. There are people who are doing low-level things, building things, speccing things out that are extremely important. They don't have time to be in the community fighting, to try and make sure that people understand what's happening. So I still see that as like one of my primary roles.
Interesting. And just for way of background, you said you are in the process of decentralizing. Did I?
We are fully decentralized.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no entities, there's no foundation, there's no, governance theater or LARPing or anything like that. Like you see in a lot of DeFi projects, unfortunately, like it's legitimately decentralized, which means, unfortunately, I don't have the ability to say, like, let's do this thing, right? Like, let's actually, set whatever mandates for inclusivity. I can advocate for it, but I can't enforce it.
Okay, interesting, right? That maybe with more centralization, like you said, it could be easier.
Blue Shift, I was like, no, I'm sorry, we're hiring that person over this person, right? That was my old company. But in Synthetix, they just, I can't hire people. I don't have that power. So,
all right. I would like to open it up for questions already and then just gather a few. And then if not, I'll have way more.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So anybody, if you want, maybe also feel free to share your experience with sort of the overall gender diversity topics, if you want to.
What do you think is going to be the catalyst to get, not just gender inclusivity, but racial and other, demographics into the Web3 space, and what sort of timeline do you expect?
I think one of the reasons why I was so excited about crypto when I first kind of came across it, I'm not the most diverse person, but I come from Australia. And, in Australia, it was very hard to raise capital, right? And you need capital to be able to build things, and you need capital to be able to, create something that you think is going to be valuable. And for me, crypto was super exciting because it really lowered the barriers to entry. Instead of having 40 white guys on Sand Hill Road who decided who got to build things, you now had anyone funding anything anywhere. I think the fact that ICOs kind of blew up and it turned into a bit of a clusterfuck was not ideal. But I think with new funding models, we are getting better and we are seeing more diverse teams geographically, and we could be better, but it's much easier to access funding today for a team in Southeast Asia or Africa or whatever than it would have been 10 years ago to go and try and raise from VCs. So I think that will help, but you then need for that team to raise funds, be successful, set a precedent, etc. And that just takes time. It might be a 5 or 10 year cycle.
And that's interesting, I feel, because when ICOs were a thing before they blew up, there was hope that female founders, right,
Yeah.
could raise easier through coins,
Yeah.
because still, obviously, it's harder as a woman to get money.
Yep, very much so.
And I was hopeful about that, but so it's kind of a bummer that went away.
It did. Yeah, I think it. We did see a little bit of that. Like we definitely saw a more diverse group of people raising funds, right? Kathleen Breitman, I think there were a couple of Australian projects with like female founders. So I think that it wasn't for nothing. Like it was definitely better than the status quo, but it could be better again. And so I think as we're seeing some of these like venture DAOs start up, particularly ones that have female founders or are led by women, that process will hopefully just accelerate and get better.
Okay, interesting. Did I say a question? No. Yes.
Like, in which way would diversity really affect the bottom line? Like, would the products look different in DeFi? Would the crypto industry, like, in which way would it be different if we really close that gender gap?
I think it depends on what the product is, right? Like, when we're talking about like very financialized products, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Or maybe it appears like it's not that big of a deal. But I think that, crypto is, and smart contract, it's an enabling technology, right? So you've got this sort of huge solution space that is not really that explored, right? And so the more diverse the groups of people are that are exploring that solution space, the better off we'll be. And so right now, if it's like, okay, would a female-led version of Aave be a better lending protocol? Like, I don't know, but, would having a more diverse range of startups with, more diverse founders build different products that could be much better than the existing products that we have? But possibly.
Do you have thoughts? Do you want to share?
No, I'm just wondering, what is the ultimate purpose of having gender equality or zero exclusion or equitability for all humans? What's the bigger picture behind it? And I agree with you. I think ultimately when we think about smart contracts or protocols, it's all automated, right, with some inherent logic. So only if we were to think that the logic needs to be different and need to encompass other values or other things. But then at the same time, it's very difficult for me to think about how these different values or cultures, encoded different values or cultures, make a better world. Yeah. I
mean, and that's why I think like I'm a markets person, right? Like I think, solutions come from markets and having competitive markets. And if we have a not very diverse marketplace of ideas, then we are not going to get to, the most optimal solutions. So I think just in principle, having a wider range of perspectives that are building things is better, just like in and of itself.
Just an answer to your question, that was like regarding this like code, if that like, it's like, because you said it's automated and I don't know if I understood it right, but like code can also be very biased, so you actually need a diverse programmer team as well, not only in the product management and higher up, but it's also very important to have like diverse developers, because people just forget to program stuff into the code, and sometimes programmers still overtake also other roles than just doing something like programming the ticket you get, right? So actually it's super important to teach programmer about ethics and about biases, and code is never neutral because it just represents a layer of our society or of the reality. So, and our society is still very biased and unequal. So yeah. I don't know if that was kind of your question.
Yeah, code can be biased for sure, without even realizing it.
Let me just add something real quick, and then I'll come to you. Maybe one other aspect of it is, right, financial equality, right? If all the guys get very rich with crypto, that causes other imbalances in society, or just perpetuates the ones we've seen on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, just sort of on a new level. And
Agreed. Yeah.
then women can be the graphics designer and the HR person maybe, but that's it. And so I feel like that's another aspect.
100%. And where does kind of the best funding come from? Often it's from like previous founders, right? Like, so, in Australia, we had this issue for a long time where all of the good founders, or the majority of good founders, would just leave, go to Silicon Valley, maybe they go to London, maybe they go to New York. And so you never had successful founders who were there to fund, mentor, help, whatever. And so we had this kind of, dearth of good projects and good companies in Australia for a long time, because you just kind of suck out the energy from the room. And so, if you do that on a gender basis or, a geographic basis or whatever, it's very problematic. So if you don't allow for female founders to become successful and then reinvest in the things they care about, then it's, a huge impediment.
And if you don't have female founders to
if you don't have female founders in the beginning, then you need the supply of
Yeah.
female founders to get successful to then reinvest, etc. Yeah.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of going off what you said along those lines of like, what do you think of companies looking to other roles like UI, UX, and like HR as to bringing up their quota aside from like putting women in engineering roles? Like, have you like observed this phenomenon, or like what are the three women in Synthetix? Like, what are their roles?
Previously we've had a couple of designers. We've never had a female engineer, like a Solidity engineer, or we had kind of a like half designer, half front end engineer for a while. But in terms of engineering diversity, it's not great, right? But that said, I don't even know that we're at the point of like having quotas, right? Where we're like even trying to like have diversity. I don't know many projects that are even talking about that. I don't think that there's much kind of social pressure from the community to say like, let's try and reach diversity. At least not that I've heard of. So it's not like we're trying to game the diversity metrics. There's no diversity metrics at all in the first place.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking from zero right now. I'm like, all right, there's half the world is full of half the women. I need to make my organization reflect such. And it's like, that's like, all right, well, we need more engineers. Like, I'm like, what do I?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of organizations that are like pushing, STEM education for women, but like, it's a long pipeline to kind of, get to a point where, you have the sort of, raw talent to be able to tap into. But I think there's a lot of.
What do you mean is that it takes a long time to have that raw talent?
So I think if you take a group of 5-year-olds, right, and they're going to all grow up to be engineers, right? It's like a 15-year process to kind of and I think we've done better over the last maybe like 5 or 10 years. But
Okay. No.
yeah, I just mean like it takes time to like train engineers, right? You can't just like click your fingers and have like 10-year senior engineers. They need to go through a process. So you need to start.
I see in a lot of startups, I see women or like also men who have like coding experience for like 2 years, self-taught, and then they just like have to like rock this project, and they don't have like good coding skills in the sense that they know how to follow some kind of how do you say that, like
Formal education or
that they know how to properly write everything unstructured, you know, but they just do it and they get employed, and like it's so many men and so little women that could also do the same. And I did some code camp, and I have a lot of friends who just started with like 27, 29 and now are full-time developers, and they are like front-end developers but also going into back-end. And it doesn't really take 15 years of time. Actually, it just takes like 2 years, and like it takes like 3 months of boot camp to like teach them the basics, the tools, and then you have a junior developer. And like I feel like there's like so many average male developers that just like taught themselves stuff and never actually like learned something in a structured way. And then I feel like always when I go to job interviews, I'm like, do you have other female developers? They're always like, no, it's so hard to find them. And I'm like, but you just need to sponsor someone like 3 months of like giving them like money to live, money to eat, money to do stuff, and then sponsor them this boot camp, and you will have a junior developer. And then you just need to get them into your company. And there are amazing female programmers out there if you give them the chance to just do that, you know?
For sure. I mean, again, like, you know, I'm not responsible for like the engineering onboarding pipeline. Unfortunately, it's not something that I have control of. And the people who are very strict about the kind of, I guess, backgrounds that they're looking for, which is a bit of a filter, right?
Solidity is super new. Like, Web3 is super new. Somebody can just learn to write smart contracts. Like, you always need to start with one programming language, and from there on you can learn other ones.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I guess I agree to an extent. I just think that like senior engineers, whether female or male, coming into the space who have got 5 or 10 years of experience, are able to be onboarded and be productive much faster than a junior engineer, and it's just the reality.
No,
right?
it's sure, but I mean, there's so much money in the space.
Sure.
And
It's like resource. Like personally, like even if I had I would not hire an entry-level engineer to work on Synthetix. Like
This is, I mean, Synthetix is a bit of like it is a bit of an anomaly because it is like a extremely complex protocol. But you know, again, like I get your point. I take your point, right? Like you can onboard people, and you can train them up, and there are boot camps and various other things. But I think that particularly for like the highly financialized protocols out there, like there's a very high bar to be able to participate.
But you would need somebody who's good in finance, right?
Not even in finance. I mean, yeah, like maybe in finance, but like
and
just
understands the logic, because at the end, programming is just like putting your thoughts into logic code.
Yeah.
Quick question. What's your vision or dream or like the motivation to set up Synthetix? Like, what do you think it's going to emerge to? How did it come about? Like, what inspires you and what's going to get everyone to?
I mean, originally we were just trying to build a good stablecoin, right? Like that was it. And then that didn't work. And so we were like, okay, we'll build something more difficult than that, which is like generalized, synthetic assets. I think now we're at a point where we see it more as an ecosystem than like a specific product. So, we've got probably 5 or 6 different separate projects that we've spun out. But for me, probably the thing that I'm most excited about is like our governance processes. So Synthetix has been this like ongoing governance experiment for the last like 4 years. And I think that some of the things that we've developed and some of the tests that we've run, we're now seeing the success that we've had kind of spread out to a lot of different projects. So the idea of like running with councils and things like that. So for me, it's like these days, governance is more exciting for me than, having like wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum or whatever.
And can you talk a bit about that? I know you've said recently that governance in DeFi is pretty shitty and needs to be improved. Paraphrasing.
Yep. No, probably not even paraphrasing.
Okay.
I probably would have sworn a bit more, but yeah. It is. I mean, it really is, right?
Why is it?
Why is it? What's the problem? The problem is that most of DeFi is governed by multi-sigs. And most of the multi-sigs are just like 4 or 5 random people that were either around a few years ago or were selected by a community arbitrarily or whatever. We don't have very robust kind of on-chain governance frameworks. And even the ones that we do, like the compound governance module, are a little bit brittle. And so the thing that was supposed to save us all originally was Aragon, right? And it kind of never really worked, like never got to a point where it was viable for running complex governance systems. So I do think that we are still in a process where we're waiting for better tooling. We're waiting for better tooling so that we can replace some of these legacy governance frameworks that we have in DeFi and other projects. So yeah, right now the overall governance tooling is pretty poor.
And I hear you say as even more projects are shifting to DAOs or we have more DAOs coming up, that's ever more important.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like we're like jamming people into like even bad tooling like even faster than we used to in the old days, right? But I think the good thing is that the more demand you have for DAO tooling, the better off it will be, right? Because again, markets will come and solve that problem. So, there's a bunch of cool projects like Orca Protocol, female founder, or it's two founders, female co-founder. It's a friend of mine. So, there's some hope. There's glimmers of hope.
And would you guys, or are you building your own tools?
We are building our own tools,
Okay.
as well. Yeah, Synthetix is building our own tools.
Can you talk a bit about what they look like, or would that be too?
No, it's fine. Basically, what we've said is where are the issues in our governance, right? Like, where are the things that our governance framework is not legitimate, right? Or where are the areas where we rely on trust rather than having token holders have control, and how do we build tooling that will allow us to remove those trusted illegitimate components. And so we've got a module that is being rolled out probably in the next 3 or 4 months that will manage elections for councils, manage elections for governing bodies, will give token holders the ability to block malicious actions, etc. A bunch of things that just don't exist right now. Just pretty simple features, but no one got around to building them because we were too busy building our own protocols, and we're happy to just do Discord votes and dumb stuff like that, do the expedient thing.
Interesting. There was a question. Yes, please.
Yeah. So I've actually used Synthetix on Optimism, and I'm curious as to why you chose Optimism for the ETH L2. Why did you choose it?
I think we chose it because there were really, at the time, this is going back over a year ago, a couple of options. There was Stockware. Stockware, the issue is that it's kind of siloed. And so if you lose composability, it's a bit problematic for a protocol like Synthetix, whereas something like DYDX can kind of get away with being siloed, and it doesn't matter. You just move your funds in, you trade, and then you move them out. So that kind of forced us down the optimistic rollups path. I think as an ETH maxi, my view is that optimistic rollups and ZK rollups will be the future. And so we wanted to kind of be one of the projects that was pushing forward with that. There was a lot of pain and suffering involved in that, and a lot of time that it took to kind of get to the point where we are. But someone had to absorb that, and we sort of saw ourselves as in a good position to absorb some of that pain and go through that process.
Yeah, going off that. Well, first I wanted. Did you guys stop doing inverses?
We did, yeah.
Why? What happened?
Because they're a really dumb idea.
That was my favorite. That's how I heard about it. I'm like, well, we could short Ripple like that.
Yeah, we've replaced them with something better. You can still short things, but the inverses had too many problems.
Yeah, I wanted to make inverse set tokens, right? Because short baskets, but what's your going off, what's your cross-chain roadmap? Are you guys going to add to Harmony or Polygon or anything like that? Or?
It's a good question. I have my own opinions, and I am a council member, so I'm one of 8 people, which doesn't give me much control. But I'm also loud and annoying, and I talk about stuff all the time. So I think my view is that we need to focus on the Ethereum ecosystem, right? So that's Optimism, Arbitrum, Polygon. From there, maybe other AVM chains make sense. But the primary impediment to that right now is that we need to merge both L2 and Optimism and L1. So at the moment, they're kind of distinct networks, right? They're independent networks. Until we merge those two networks, we can't really expand to further chains. So that's happening in the next 6 weeks. Once that's done, then we can look around and say, okay, where does it make sense for us to go?
How do you see that merge happening?
Painfully. Like everything that we do.
Okay, then envision.
Yeah.
And you don't know any type of Polygon or anything like that?
In terms of timeline, so I think there was a proposal in our research forum to move to Polygon, but we're literally blocked. We can't move to Polygon until we merge the two networks. Once we merge the two networks, then it becomes much easier, and it's probably on the order of weeks or months to deploy to other networks, but we just have to get some of this core work done first.
Yes.
What makes a really good dev?
I'm not an engineer, so I don't know.
You're in this space long enough.
Yeah, I mean, look, what makes a really good engineer, I think...
Contributor, maybe also.
Yeah, good contributor. So I think someone particularly because we are really still so early in this process and there is still so much to discover, someone who is really curious, and like curious and diligent, is willing to dig into problems. I think there are a lot of engineers out there that are just like, oh, let me just do the quick thing, and this is the easy solution. Some of our best engineers on Synthetix will spend days or weeks like obsessively kind of digging into a problem to really understand like exactly why it is a problem and understand the solution. And those people are usually very successful.
And I hear you say, regardless of male or female, or would you say are there qualities that female developers could do better than male?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's like spectrums of different qualities that people have, right? And within one person, you've got some people that are just happy to YOLO things like me. And then you've got, people that are like super obsessive and detail oriented and want, I don't think that it's a male or female thing. I think it's like a personality thing. We see people, within our engineering group that have all kinds of different, capabilities and characteristics.
I have another question on more. It's like a problem, and you're sitting there.
That's why we have you.
Yes. So, like, normally, like, we as women, we always are a few years behind men for like the same position because men applied earlier for a job that they're not qualified for, blah blah blah. Right now, people in the Web3 space, like, it's all male developers. So at the time when you like have some female developer actually like reaching that expertise point, you already have like all of these men being so much far ahead, and like wouldn't it also like be very helpful to like work against this with just onboarding women, even if they are like how, I mean, it's a problem, and like how can we solve this? Like because you're saying like 15 years, and that would be like 15 years that women are behind.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to say to this is like when you talk about this, like they have to be very diligent and like to be super interested in this topic. Like I'm super interested in blockchain, but I also have a lot of other stuff to do, and I feel like women are still basic caregivers in families. They don't have the time to sit 20 hours in their room and just like contribute to different GitHub projects and then apply for a job and get it. And so if I apply for for a job, like I was wondering, like I'm here as a female developer, and I was like, I thought people would just come to me, but they don't. And when I talk to head of development and I tell them like, so I have also other stuff to do, I don't want to work 50 hours per week, they're just like, okay, bye. And this is like, I feel like this is what we mean when we talk about toxic environment. We don't have the time actually to work that much to keep up with guys in the same position. And I feel like this is something that should be addressed more.
I mean, it's a societal it's a structural issue in society on some level, right?
Companies that are striving for diversity should address this topic, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it is fair. And, one probably like practical solution is have more like female-led projects, right? Where, they're...
Okay. Don't you think also male-led projects can just like invest in women and be like...
They can, but like we have to be pragmatic, right? Like you're talking about like very low-level structural issues in society and saying like, why don't we just fix them? Like there's a reason why those issues I think exist, and if you are going to attack a problem and like some like inadequate equilibria that exists within society, you need to like pick some kind of point that you can drive a wedge in, right? And so I think if you have a bunch of projects within the space that are led by female founders or have like, female-led engineering teams, you're going to get a better outcome than you have now. As opposed to like, I don't know how you solve, these like wider societal issues.
I don't think it's a societal issue. I think it's
you're saying like women have less time due to like being caregivers or whatever. Like, I don't know how to solve that problem.
Companies would offer a solution for these women, be like, you don't have to like have side jobs. You don't have to like, here's money so you can like, somebody can clean your house. Here's, I don't know, stuff,
Yeah.
And also maybe cut down on toxic hours in the tech space, which are just like everybody is so proud of working 60 hours per week, but I don't think that's a goal.
I would love to work 60 hours. That sounds amazing. But no, and I say that as a joke, but like it's like literally like it's in like DeFi is genuinely insane. Like it is super early. Like I don't know that you can work 30 hours a week and be able to keep up with everything that's happening in the space. It's very difficult, and I don't know how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't see the responsibility with the companies. I see the responsibility also with other females, or like people being a role model and onboarding their community. And I actually see that in my community, for example, women tend to be a bit, more resistant to aping on something, right? Like a bit more risk averse, and I really have to put a lot of energy in, activating them. But you also have to show them the way to find their place in the blockchain community. And I think it's about, you have to be willing to learn, like super curious. I think this is one of the key competencies someone has to succeed in blockchain, that you're always willing to learn, to read, to listen to another podcast. I actually just, came out of a 2.5-year parental leave back to the blockchain space. And I really I didn't even have to have a conversation with my future employer about my work hours. They won't track it. They're just, confident that I'm going to do. And I think this is actually the spirit of the space. I think the companies are doing fine. But for example, me now, as a new mother, I actually want to show other women how to set up validator nodes, get a passive income. You don't have to be a developer, but you understand layer ones. It's a learning process. It's also like a portfolio management or investment strategy that you say, hey, why don't you want to, next to real estate or ETFs, also add some validator nodes in your portfolio? For example, it's also our, task as a community, not only with the big projects.
I'm there to talk to you.
Yeah, but I think it's really, you have to know someone who did it, and this person has to activate you, right? Because the company won't, even if they offer you the money, and you're a mother, for example, that is struggling the support of your partner, you need another mother to show you that it's possible, I would say.
And I see you, and you. Just wanted to add to that discussion, right? Because that's something Wall Street has talked about for years, that hedge fund managers and investment bankers, that it's just expected you work 100 hours a week, regardless if you're male or female. But it so happens that typically male employees can do that better, or don't have other things, or have the luxury to just plow in. And that has not been solved, neither there nor probably just in corporate America, nor here. Not saying that's better or worse, I'm just putting out that it's a problem.
It's a general problem. I think it's also exacerbated in crypto because there's just so much stuff going on. Like you fall behind, I fall behind, like don't go on Discord for like a week and I'm like, what is happening here? Yeah, exactly.
There's a question in the back,
Can I comment on this discussion?
No, of course. Please go ahead.
So 2 things. One as a developer and one as like a business owner running a company. So first on the developer point, from my perspective, the idea that crypto is in this position where you have to work 60 hours, you have to go 20 hours contemplating this issue. This to me is a sign of the infancy of crypto, that it is so difficult to get into this space because of these kinds of commitments that we're talking about. It's very easy to come here to ETH Denver and hear, 15,000 people tried to sign up and see this as a sign of success. But in my opinion, it's very dangerous to think that we are successful right now because of these kinds of commitments that we're talking about. I have so I'm a university professor, and I have lots of students of mine who, Christine Kendall was very interested in doing machine learning, and she is a new mother, and she's able to get involved in that space because it's really a vibrant developer marketplace where people can learn about what they care about, find a job. She happens to be doing a part-time job that she's going to expand into a full-time one later. And when you look at a really developed market like that, these kinds of things are possible. So from my perspective, one of the ways that we can help create a crypto ecosystem that's going to be fruitful for everybody is to drastically lower the barrier to entry of blockchain. And that's what my company is, that's one of our goals is. So that's my comment as a developer. Now, as a business owner, I think that this idea that getting an employee who's going to work 100 hours, I think is an extremely short-sighted thing, which is a bad plan. I think that it may be the case that Wall Street does this or something like that. I do not aspire to be Wall Street. And I'm very happy to make different decisions than them. And so I spend a lot of time thinking very hard about like how I, as someone running a company, can send the right message to my employees. And there are little things that I try to do, which is like, I don't message them on the weekend. I make use of that Slack feature where you can schedule a message. Lots of people get messages from me at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And I'm not on my computer at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And I think that there are little things that you can do to show respect for people's time. And you can demonstrate it in yourself as well. I like to make sure that all my employees know that the most important part of my identity is not as a programmer or a company founder, it's as a father. And that's what matters most for me. And I think that there are little ways that you, when you're running a company, can make these smart decisions to be welcoming to people who have more in their life than just the next crypto scheme.
And can I follow up with that? How you said lowering barriers to entry into the blockchain space? Talk about that. How does that look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, in fact, we're going to be giving a panel in a little bit. So I want to use the question time to do another talk, so we'll talk later.
All right. Do you have anything you want to follow up on? Okay.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to realize that a lot of us, especially like males who don't have families, are addicted to this space. And we love this space, and like it is to the point, it's very similar. I would say that someone gets radicalized and joins the DAO. Like that's how a lot of us are with Web3. Like we believe in this shit, we push this shit to everywhere there's space, and like this never stops. And like we're in it. So it's really hard to compete, but there needs like definitely a healthy, more like better lifestyle where people are just more productive. I think will ultimately like beat that like toxic behavior, but it's like, yo, we're addicted. Like,
I read a story today about crypto addiction and how there's therapists like dealing specifically with crypto people who need mental help. Obviously,
we can only have one more question, then we got to wrap up.
All right, I saw one.
Just one question. When do you think on-chain exchanges will replace like centralized exchanges? So
I mean, it's already happening.
Well, when do you think the tipping point
completely?
Yeah.
So wait, the question is when will we have no more centralized exchanges?
Or when, like, well,
more decentralized.
It will be the norm basically because it's but more of a niche amongst the.
I think like probably 5+ years. Yeah.
And what's that going to take? Do you think to get?
I think it's going to take a lot of things, but I mean, you know, you look at FTX, you look at Coinbase, etc. Like they've got big war chests. You don't run them down in 20 minutes. It's going to take a bit of time.
And will regulators allow that?
I think regulators are becoming more comfortable with centralized exchanges, maybe less comfortable with decentralized exchanges. So we've got headwinds, but I think like it's pretty clear the direction the market's going. It's just how long will it take? And I think it's going to be more like 5+ years than next year.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for this really frank discussion. Let me just say also how much I value that you are here raising this topic and are willing to talk about this, because I feel women can have their DAOs and do the things, but unless, guys in your position talk about this as men and raise it as men in communities, right? That's really where change happens. So thank you.
Appreciate
that. All right.